Welcome to our video on creating assignments in Scholar Ultra courses. This video will cover just the creation process. We'll have another video which will cover the student experience and how you grade the assignments. Before we get started, there's a few things that you need to know about assignments in Ultra courses. First off, assignments and tests are the same thing in Ultra. That means the only thing that'll change whether you select assignment or test is the icon and the default grade center category. Another thing is that due dates are required in assignments in Ultra. This is a change from how they worked in Original, where we didn't really even suggest you use them. What's nice about that, though, is you can control when the students can submit the assignment using the due date. It's actually a lot more flexible than the old availability-based system Original courses used. Finally, when you're creating an assignment, it's important that you only add text to an assignment to get it to behave like an Original course one. If you add questions like multiple choice, essay, things like that, it'll behave more like a test, and we'll cover those separately in our tests video series. Alright, let's get started. So the first step in creating an assignment is to click the plus sign where we want it to go. So it can go anywhere, but we're just going to click the one at the top here because it's easier. And I'm going to click the Create button. This pops open the Create Item Peek panel, and if we look down here near the bottom, you will see Assessment, and under there you'll see Test and Assignment. Now remember, as we said in the beginning, tests and assignments are the same thing in Ultra, just the icon and the default grading category change. But we'll click Assignment. And the first thing we need to do is give our assignment a name. So that's done, and now we will go down to the middle here where you put the content in your assignment. Now, again, remember, because this is the same thing as a test, you can do test questions here and other things. But if you want to do a traditional assignment, the only thing you should add is the Add Text button. And you can do all your files and everything from here in Add Text. So we can type the instructions for the assignment. Also, if you have templates or written instructions or anything like that, you should attach them here. Just click the attachment button, and you can find a file that you can attach. And just like with any other file on Ultra, you can choose whether the students can view and download it, view it only, or download it only. When you are creating an assignment, these actually all have use cases. If it's instructions or something, you probably want the students to view only or view and download. If it's a template or something, you don't want them to click view and try to edit it because that won't work, so you'd make it download only. I'm just going to click save here and click save. So I've got my text in there. The assignment is ready to go. Now it's time to edit the settings. So I go over here to click the gear. You can also click any of these links and the same thing will work. It takes you to the same place. So I'm going to click the gear though, and the assignment settings peek panel comes out. The first thing I can set is the due date. Now, unlike in Original courses, the due date is actually required. So it'll appear in the student's activity stream, it'll appear if they use the calendar for the courses, and of course it'll appear on the assignment. And you'll notice one of the things that you can do with the due date is you can prohibit late submissions, which means that if the student has it open and the time ends, then whatever they've already put in will be submitted. So if they don't have anything in there, they won't be able to submit anything. Or you can prohibit new attempts after the due date, which means if they've clicked on it by the time the due date hits, then they'll be able to finish the submission process. For an assignment, it's probably better to do the prohibit new attempts, but not the late submissions, because in theory, they'll have typed it somewhere else. We'll keep scrolling. A lot of these are turned off for assignments because they're more test-designed things. But we do, when we get down here to grading and submissions, have some options. You can, and this is different from Original, put it into a grade center category with this drop down here, so you don't actually have to go into the gradebook and move it to a category, which is something that's a little bit new. You can control how many attempts the student has. They can have up to 10 or unlimited attempts. And again, this is once they click submit, That's what actually determines whether it's an attempt or not. If you have multiple attempts, you can actually choose which attempt counts for the grade. The two biggest ones that people use are the highest grade, which means if they submit again and you grade it and they lose points, then it doesn't hurt them. Or the last attempt, which means any time they submit and you grade it, that's their new grade. However, there's also some other ones here. You can choose the average of the attempts. You can choose the first time they grade. This is more useful for tests if they want to reuse it for studying. Or the lowest grade, which I don't recommend using. Keep scrolling down here, and you can choose whether you grade on a letter, points, or a percentage. That's both how you enter the grade and how it displays to students. And you can choose the maximum points available for the assignment. Now this should match whatever it has on your syllabus, because if it doesn't, it can create some problems with the calculations. Next, we have anonymous grading. If you want to hide the students' names until you're ready to grade the assignment, you can use that. It's a little beyond the scope of our class. There's also delegated grading and peer review. That stuff is beyond the scope of this. As we keep moving down, you'll see we have post-assessment grades automatically. Unlike in original courses, you actually have to post the grades before students can see them. If you check this box, it reverts the behavior back to the same behavior as had on original, where as soon as you enter a grade, it's automatically visible to the students, which is not often what people want. We keep scrolling down. These assessment results here, these are really, again, for if you're using this as a test, not an assignment, as well as the access code, the lockdown browser, time limit. If you use a rubric, you can attach it here with this Add Grading rubric. That's beyond the scope of this video, but it might be covered in a later video. If you're doing a group assignment, you can assign the groups with the Assign to Groups here. Again, that'll be covered in a later video. So last, we're going to look at enabling Safe Assign. So to do that, we click Enable Safe Assign here under Originality Report. And you'll see this toggle right here at the top. So I'm going to give that a click. Now remember, Safe Assign is not perfect. It checks 4 things. It checks the internet. It checks every paper ever submitted to Safe Assign at Christopher Newport University. It checks the papers that have been voluntarily submitted to what they call the Global Reference Database at other institutions. Students can choose whether their paper is added to that database. They can't choose whether it is checked against that database. And finally, the ABI Inform ProQuest database. There's 2 checkboxes here under Safe Assign. The first is allow students to view the Safe Assign Originality Report for their attempts. If you check this box, the students will be able to see their Safe Assign report. Now there's 2 schools of thought with this. Some faculty think that it makes students better cheaters and so don't want to check the box. The other way of thinking about this is it teaches students what needs to be cited, and so it's actually a useful teaching tool, which you believe is really what tells you whether you're going to check that box or not. The next one down is exclude submissions from the institutional and global reference databases. What this means is it'll check the paper against all the databases, but it won't add them to the database. Now you might say, why would I want to do that? Well, the reason is if you have the same content submitted twice, maybe you have the students write their intro and then write the full paper, or maybe write a rough draft and a final draft as separate assignments, the second time that the student submits that content, it'll be marked as self-plagiarism. So the way we get around this is we check this box on the rough draft. It still checks it for plagiarism against everything except the other students' rough drafts. And then on the final draft, you don't check it, and it'll add that final draft to the database to be checked against. So I'm going to check that because I don't like to have to create new Safe Assign things when I do these demos. Alright, so I click Save, and my assignment settings are all done, so I can click Save again, and we are ready to go, except we haven't made the assignment visible to students yet. So you see up here at the top it says Hidden from Students. I have to make that visible to students, and you're going to see that a lot with Ultra items. Everything is invisible by default, and you have to make it visible when it's ready to go. So this brings us to the end of our video on how you create assignments. The next video in this series will cover how the students submit their work and how you grade it. For now, if you have any questions, you can get help at the information you see here on the screen, and we'll also post this in the video description. Thanks for watching.